أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يعلم الله الذين جاهدوا منكم ويعلم الصابرين صدق الله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and Eid Mubarak if it's Eid for you already or not. Eid Mubarak if it's early for you. Oh, great. You bring your hands up if you can hear me, I'm assuming. Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, welcome to the final session. Can you believe we're already here? 30 days complete. MashaAllah. Look at the tawfiq that Allah has given us. We've discussed so many different things. We've gone through the outline of the Quran. We talked about tafsir, the different types of tafsir that exist. We talked about tafsir bil-ra'i. Allah gave us the tawfiq to go into the depths. You guys were extrapolating fantastically when it came to the story of Khidr and Musa in Surah Kaf. And then we did something that I've never done before and I've always wanted to do, which was actually go through the entire story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam as per the Holy Quran. There have been good times and there have been not so good times when the internet has been slow, for example. You guys have been absolutely wonderful. Because it's the last day, I'm only going to give a very, very short discussion. And then what I want to do is just open up the floor and we'll have a casual discussion. There's two types of teachers. There's that one type who, even if it's the last day of term, he's going to give you homework and go through the class. But then there's the cool type of teacher who on the last day understands it's the last day, guys. Nobody really wants to study. We just want to chill out and say Khuda Hafiz, maybe take some pictures of each other as a class. There were some people that I wanted to highlight. One of them hasn't come yet, but inshallah, if they join, I'll point that out as well. The thing that I wanted to very, very briefly talk about is the verse that I have begun all of these discussions with, pretty much all of them, and a verse which basically I start before I recite any lecture, and that is أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَن تَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ وَلَمَّا يَعْلَمِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا مِنكُمْ وَيَعْلَمَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah, again, remember in the last session, we talked about how Allah sometimes uses rhetorical questions in order to get you to think. In this beautiful verse, He is telling us, do you think that you are going to enter Jannah while Allah has not known those among you who, number one, do jihad, and those among you who are of the sabirin? Okay, so number one, jihad, struggle in the way of Allah, is so fundamental to the overarching themes and message of the Quran, yet it's something that is often neglected. Now, one thing that we often feel tempted to do, especially in the Western world, is to relegate the concept of jihad to just the greater jihad. So let me just elaborate a little bit on that. You guys have heard this hadith already, but let me remind you of it. Combatants were returning from the battlefield and they came to the Holy Prophet, and he said to them, congratulations upon having completed the smaller jihad. And as I always say, you don't just visualize the Quran, try to visualize the hadith also. They're tired, they're hungry. Some of them have wounds, maybe. Some of them have lost comrades in the battle. And now he's telling them, this, what you have done, all these sacrifices that you have made, is the smaller jihad. So they said, Ya Rasulullah, O Messenger of God, what is the greater jihad? And he told them, the greater jihad is the jihad against the nafs, the inner soul, the inner desires that every human being is inculcated with. This is a true hadith. Imam Khomeini talks about this hadith. It might be one of the first hadith that he actually brings in his brilliant book, 40 Hadith. Um, and it really does illustrate for us that the more important jihad is the jihad of the inner soul, a battle against your inner kingdom. And I just want to expand on this a little bit. Dear brothers and sisters, the way Imam Khomeini talks about this is like there is a literal battle going on inside you. There are kingdoms inside you. And sometimes the forces of evil within take over those inner kingdoms, take over those inner planets. Like Imam Ali alayhi salam said, you think you're only a tiny entity, yet within you is the entire universe. Well, there's a whole epic Star Wars like scenario going on in your inner heart. There's entire kingdoms which are being conquered by your arrogance, for example. For example, by your ghadab, your anger, or your fear. Perhaps by your shahwa, your desires, or your faculty of imagination. What your task is to fight that inner battle and ensure that that inner profit that we've talked about, i.e., the aql, the intellect, that becomes empowered within you. That takes the throne of control within you. Put your hands up if you have seen Inside Out, the movie Inside Out. I don't think that many people will have watched it. Okay, some people have. I would recommend this movie just to understand how there really are faculties within you represented in the movie by anger or happiness or sadness or these inner powers. Imam Khomeini actually talks about these things. And when I first watched the movie, I burst into tears because it was what Imam Khomeini has been talking about when it comes to the spiritual battle within, right? And it really does highlight that for you. Happiness, by the way, the thing that is, the character represents happiness. When that character takes control of the person, you'll notice that she always behaves in the best possible way. And this is actually a reality. People think of intellect, the aql, as being very robotic. I say this is the word of Allah, therefore do this. And it expands to the angels also, because as you know, the angels were created only with intellect, not with shahwa, whereas the animals were created only with shahwa, desire, not with intellect. It's the humans who combined both. We have both shahwa, i.e. desire, and intellect. But there's another hadith which I actually stumbled across after coming to the conclusion that aql, intellect, is the true path to happiness. It is actually that thing which makes you happy. After arriving intellectually at this conclusion, Allah guided me to a hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam, where he actually says that the fruit of the intellect is as-surur, happiness. Okay, so we have to bear this in mind. When you follow the intellectual path, and I mean the divinely intellectual path, when you follow that path as per the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt and your inner hujjas, it will lead you to a place of supreme happiness. People often think that happiness belongs to desire. It doesn't. That's a Western idea that they have pushed, and it has found its home in our hearts. We need to expel that. That is desire. And fulfilling your desires will only give you a kind of material, temporary upliftment, right? But happiness is something that is here. It's here. It's something more. And you can only find it through following the internet. And so, what you need to do in this greater jihad, dear brothers and sisters, is to truly take your armies of intellect and overthrow, bring about a revolution inside your heart, and make sure that the aql, that prophet, that imam, he is empowered over all the inner tyrants. Now, that's when it comes to the greater jihad, which is inevitably important. However, that should not make us think that the smaller jihad is not important. Notice that even in the hadith, the Holy Prophet is addressing the soldiers who have already attended the smaller jihad. They've already fought physically with the enemies. It's almost as if fighting the smaller jihad is a prerequisite to the greater jihad, i.e., if you're not doing the smaller jihad, what spiritual progress are you really hoping to make? And this is a part of the story which a lot of people have neglected, and many scholars have whitewashed the concept of jihad itself. And of course, you have the Western media and all the politicians of the Western world and the Eastern world also, who have defamed the concept of jihad. Jihad is a beautiful concept, it's an honorable concept, and it is a concept that it will transform you into heroes. Essentially, what Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam is waiting for is people who believe in themselves and believe in Allah and believe in the Day of Judgment and believe in Him. But people who are willing to jump into the battlefield and understand that they are ready to sacrifice whatever it takes in order to support the truth. Right now, when it comes to jihad, many of you might be, for example, sisters, and many of you might be brothers also. But you might think to yourself, well, I don't have the opportunity to do the smaller jihad. I want to do it. I want to fight in the way of Allah. How do I do that? And you have to understand here that jihad doesn't just mean struggling. It means struggling against the enemy of Islam. So the first thing that you have to do is identify the enemy of Islam. Once you identify that enemy or those enemies, the second step is for you to confront that enemy. And there's many a hadith in this regard about how a true believer is one who will confront that enemy with his hand. If he can't do it with his hand, he'll do it with his tongue. If he can't do it with his tongue, then at least he will do it with his heart. And I would argue actually that to fight against the enemies of our time, the enemies of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, is one of the most honorable things to do. It is, in fact, the Zainabi path. Sayyidah Zainab Salamullah alayha is a huge role model, not just for us as sisters, but for brothers too. And what she demonstrates is the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because somebody understood how significant jihad is, and they desperately wanted to do not just jihad, but the best jihad. So they asked the Prophet, O Rasulullah, what is the best form of jihad? And he said, Kalimatu haqqin 'inda sultanin ja'ir. It is to speak a word of truth in the face of a tyrannical ruler. That is what you and I need to bring ourselves to have the courage to do. So that when Allah asks that rhetorical question in the Quran, do you suppose that you're going to enter Jannah while you haven't done jihad? You can at least say on the Day of Judgment, oh my Lord, I did fight in your way. I did it not through physical means. I didn't use physical weapons, but I used whatever means you gave me. And you gave me my phone. Phones are like the swords of today. You gave me my computer. You gave me the technology that I needed to confront that enemy. And so I did my best to confront them, to call them out, to expose them, to expose and fight against anyone who supports those tyrants, right? And this is really, dear brothers and sisters, what we need to do. Because, as I've said before, and I don't want to repeat this too much, at the same time, I do want this to go home to you. You know, I want to hammer it home. Your scholars have whitewashed the deen. They have made it into a religion which is just hippie. It's just a flowery religion. Whereas the real reality of the religion is the deen which transforms ordinary human beings into heroes. The deen which makes it so that the tyrants, bullies, evildoers become terrified. That is what Muslims are really supposed to try to make themselves into. So that's the first part. The second part is وَيَعْلَمَ الصَّابِرِينَ, and he knows those who are patient. So there's two things that Allah raises in this rhetorical question. And the first of them is jihad, and the second of them is sabirin, to be among the patient. Now, first and foremostly, patient. Everywhere you see the word patient in the Quran, you're going to have to do a little bit more work because it's not talking about patience. Unfortunately, it is a mistranslation because the concept of sabr in the Quran is not talking about patience, i.e., sitting and waiting. If you're getting slapped, just be like, oh, I'm going to be patient. No. Sabr, often in the Quran, you'll notice it's used in the context of the battlefield, right? For example, it says, if there are only 100 patient ones among you, they'll be able to defeat many more of the enemies. What does that patience mean? How does patience help you? And when I was a couple of years back, before I, entered the more advanced Hausa studies, I was under the impression that it means those who can just go to the battlefield and wait. I'm waiting. This is going to allow me to defeat many more of the enemies, right? It's actually quite tragically silly if you think about it in that way, but many people do assume that patience means that. And this is, by the way, another reason for why a lot of the scholars, one of the things that we've had to do is to explain to people that waiting for Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, being patient in terms of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, doesn't mean sitting on your laurels. It means being active. It means highlighting the enemies of Imam Mahdi, recognizing them so that you can recognize him, right? Because the word patience has been employed in the sense of just sitting and doing nothing and waiting, right? Patience, sabr rather, in the Quran is talking about perseverance, perseverance, steadfastness. It's talking about pushing against the enemies no matter what. There is a dua, one of the hidden duas that you might find in Mafatihul Jinan. And it's one of the du'as that you can recite for the sake of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. Would you guess one of the verses that actually appears in that du'a? It says, كَأَنَّهُمْ بُنْيَانٌ مَرْصُوصٌ. There's a verse of the Quran which says Allah loves those who fight in His way as though they are a firm, compact wall, right? And this is how the Muslims are supposed to be. Put your hands up if you've ever seen the shield wall formation or the phalanx, where these old ancient soldiers, you might have seen it in movies, where they link their shields together and they push against the enemies, right? There's a particular movie where they show this very, very closely to what the Islamic concept is. I don't want to mention that movie because I cannot stand that movie. I hate that movie, and it's just full of so much sexual explicitness that I don't want to even mention it. But I'm sure many of you guys have picked it up, right? This idea of becoming a firm, compact wall. When you do that, the idea is that you push against the enemy lines, even if they have many arrows, many spears, many soldiers. If you are sabirin, not patient, see, steadfast, resilient, you're going to push them back to the point where they might fall off the edge of the cliff or into a ravine or maybe off the edge of the earth, right? If you have that level of patience, sabr. So these are the two things, dear brothers and sisters, that you have to really acquire. And I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite ahadith that I love to quote. Okay. This is from Imam Ali alayhi salam, and it's one of those numbered ahadith. There's many ahadith, if you notice, they actually have numbers. There's this many traits of this kind of a person. There's this many things that you need to do if you accomplish this. Sometimes if you crack them open, you'll actually be cracking open a code that will help you in life. And this particular hadith has helped me a great deal in life also. And that's why I want to share it with you today on our final session. Imam Ali alayhi salam said, there are five things that should acquire your greatest anxiety to acquire them, right? So you should be severely anxious. It should keep you up at night if you don't have these five traits. What are these five traits? Number one, have hope only in Allah. Abandon hope in everybody other than Allah. That's the first step. And by the way, this hope is a kind of, in a sense, it's a reverence, it's a worship, it's ibadah. Get rid of that hope in anyone and everything except for Allah. No system is going to be there for you. No people are going to help you. No money, no funds are going to prop you up. Nothing is there for you. You're just a floating vessel in the middle of space. The only thing that's going to come to your rescue and help you and guide you and be there for you is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Ali alayhi salam is telling us the first thing is to have hope only in Allah. The second thing he says is be afraid of nothing but sins. Not Allah. In this particular hadith, it's interesting. He doesn't say even to fear Allah. He says to fear sins. See, you have to understand that sins don't hurt anyone unless you're doing the types of sins which do hurt other people, right? You're actually hurting other people. You might use foul language, you might insult people, you might hurt somebody physically, God forbid, or you might steal something from somebody else. Those are hurting people. But commonly speaking, alhamdulillah, because you guys are a level above that, inshallah, and you don't usually step on other people's rights, God forbid, many of the sins that we're committing are only hurting ourselves. They're only hurting ourselves, right? And therefore, it's intellectual to fear them, to be cautious of them. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, fear nothing. Don't be afraid of this or that or the tyrannical powers even. Don't be afraid of losing friends. Don't be afraid of anything except sins. And then he says, if you do not know a thing, never feel ashamed to admit ignorance. If you can learn this trait in life, dear brothers and sisters, it's going to help you a great deal to just be able to say, I don't know. Sometimes you are put into certain situations where your environment will make you feel embarrassed. They will tell you, look how silly you are. For example, if you don't know an Islamic concept, somebody might say, oh, you don't even know that. Everybody knows that. And that's perfectly fine. Let people make fun out of you. It's a good thing and an honorable thing, in fact, to be able to say, I don't know. The fourth thing Imam Ali alayhi salam says is related to that. And he says, if you do not know a thing, never feel ashamed to learn it. Dear brothers and sisters, sometimes when you want to embark on a new journey, you'll go right back to square one. For example, I'll take my own example, right? I had to go through, and it reflects for all of you. You'll all understand this. You go to nursery or kindergarten. Then after that, you go to primary school or whatever they call it in other countries, primary school, and then you have to pass certain tests, and then you get to high school or secondary school. At the end of secondary school, there's a whole load of pressure. You have to pass your GCSEs, otherwise you're not going to go to sixth form. Eventually you go to sixth form. Then you have loads of pressure. You're getting higher and higher and higher, and then finally you go to university, inshallah. You graduate from there, and then I come to the Hulza. I've accomplished everything. I'm at the top now. You know, kindergartners, you little Oompa Loompas, ha ha, right? You're looking down at the rest of the world. When I came to the Hulza, however, I came right down to the bottom again. They were saying alif ba, Elif Ba. Put your hands up if you've seen Three Idiots. I'm going to be so happy if more hands go up for this. Three Idiots is a must watch, a must watch. Three Idiots is a fantastic movie, and this movie will actually help you to broaden your horizons in many ways and to understand the Islamic concept. It's really an Islamic concept. Many of those things, dear brothers and sisters, that attract you, that appeal to you, that you feel, wow, this is such a great concept. They're actually Islamic concepts. They're divine, Alawi concepts. They're concepts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why they're appealing to you. But you remember in that movie, the guy is like making fun out of the guy who you assume is the third idiot, and he says A for apple, B for ball, right? You make fun out of it, and you end up humiliating yourself. I'm back down to the basics. And I just want to give you a very quick example of this from one of the great scholars of the past. He spent his entire life learning, 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 learning. He gets really old, like really old, white beard. Death is knocking on his door like every day. I'm talking so old, he's got one foot in the grave. He's about he's about to kick the bucket, okay? And at that point, he discovers a chamber, some sort of chamber, which has an entire library full of new knowledge. And he goes to himself, oh my God. But there was a problem. All of that knowledge was in a different language, which he didn't know. Do you know what that alim started to do? He started to learn the ABCs of that language to try to dive into the depths of that entire chamber, that entire library. One of his students came to him and he said, you are about to die. Like, why are you wasting your time trying to learn a new science? The scholar said that, this is the way that we are supposed to be. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, gain knowledge from the cradle to the grave. Every moment of your life, dear brothers and sisters, you should be learning something new. And you should have the courage sometimes to understand that if you're not learning something, maybe it ain't worth it. Move on, find another way, right? So, if you do not know a thing, never feel ashamed to learn it. Don't let people make you think that you're humiliated or anything by doing so. Ask those questions that you want to ask. Be the person who's brave enough to ask them when others don't. And the fifth and final thing, dear brothers and sisters, is to acquire sabr. What does sabr mean? Patience? No. I was just about to say patience because that's how we've memorized them. We've memorized them with that common translation. Sabr, acquire sabr, steadfastness, resilience, right? And then he says, because the relationship between sabr and true faith is like that of a head to a body. A body cannot survive without a head. Similarly, true faith cannot survive without sabr, right? Without true resilience, steadfastness. So that concludes my short discussion today. Dear brothers and sisters, I hope you benefited from it, inshallah. The person has arrived within... Okay, no problem. It disappeared. Okay, so I wanted to give rewards to all of you. You all have been fantastic. You all have been extrapolating. There are two people that I wanted to call out. I hope they don't get embarrassed. But the first of them was Sister Fatima Hatab. I don't know you guys, by the way, but Sister Fatima Hatab, I've noticed that she was always contributing, always asking really cool questions. She always had a lot to offer. So God bless you. And brother Kyle Williams, you did a fantastic job as well. The one person I feel who went that little step further and really demonstrated investigative, almost detective work when we were having our discussions, and almost to the point where, he was challenging what I was saying, which at the end of the day, it benefits the overall discussion. That was Brother Kyle Williams. So these two, Sister Fatima Haddad and Brother Kyle Williams, you have been the star pupils. if we can have a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad for these two in particular. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. And now, for all of you collectively, you all have done a fantastic job. I believe that you have made great progress during these 30 days. This has been a month of Ramadan, which I feel has been quite different to other months previously, not just in terms of how much we've learned, how much we've gained Quranically, and in terms of the Salah. I believe that Allah has increased us spiritually in ways that in other months, maybe respectively, it hasn't been the case. That's how I feel anyway, Alhamdulillah. And I think that it's been a great honor for me and a privilege to have shared this journey with all of you. In the future, I would like you guys, inshallah, to talk about these sessions with other peoples because we're going to try to have more sessions in the near future. And the more people who are aware of them and understand that they are truly beneficial and they really, you gain something from it, the more people are likely to join. And that's really what we want, to open up the doors to more people. But you, fantastic people, are going to always be remembered, inshallah, as those initial forerunners, the first guys. God bless all of you. Okay, so we're going to, I'm just going to open up the doors for any questions, comments, or anything that you guys would like to share with the group and with myself today. As-salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad for all of you and all of your families. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.